Welcome back to the KC Sports Report. I'm your host, Michael Darcy, and today I'm joined by my good friend, beat writer Lucas Murhpy, and we're going to talk about some potential cut candidates for the Kansas City Chiefs. So Chiefs Kingdom, we've hit that point in the offseason where we're getting close to the Chiefs making some important roster decisions, and they're going to have to cut some players to get down to that final 53. Now, there's been some players in training camp that have really impressed, and there's also been some players that have not done very well. So, Lucas, before we kind of talk about some of the names, is there anybody that sticks out to you right away as a cut candidate?
Man, I don't want to say it because I went ahead and signed him in fantasy. I have a pretty deep fantasy league where we sign contracts, and I went ahead and signed Josh Gordon to a one-year deal. This might be a kind of an easy one for some people, but, man, I think Josh Gordon's not going to make the squad. I mean, if you watch the preseason game, if you've been paying attention to any of training camp, catching the football for some reason seems to be a problem. At one point yesterday, I don't know if Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid were highlighting Josh Gordon's ill ability to run a route, but the throw was, to his left, and they looked at each other, and basically Andy and Patrick were like, what the F? So I don't know if Josh Gordon is just not figuring it out, if his want to play football is there or what's going on. But I think for me, he's not going to make this squad.
I 1,000% agree. That's actually the first name that I had on the list. Josh Gordon, it's a great story. He came back after dealing with some substance abuse problems and drugs and getting banned for the league for a while. And he came back and has been sober and been able to play on the football field. But the harsh reality is that he hasn't been very good when he has played. And I think that, that's only been highlighted by the offseason and in training camp. He's not running with the ones. He's not really running with the twos. He's kind of running with the fours and maybe the fives. And when he does make a catch, it's kind of few and far between. He drops a lot of passes. And, even at training camp when they interviewed him, he's kind of like, my only goal is to make the team. But he didn't really sound that enthusiastic. Like he kind of knew that it was towards the end. And I have no question about Josh Gordon's desire to play football. I just wonder if at this point the things that he's done to his body and just being out of football for so long, that's just kind of caught up to him and he can't play anymore.
Yeah, it's hard to really say. I mean, it's just, man, he's given an opportunity, and he really could have shined, I feel like. But that's also the Chiefs. I mean, the Chiefs went out and really, in a way, put a lot of pressure on him. I mean, they went out, drafted Sky Moore. They go out and get guys like Corey Coleman, who I think is really has a good chance of making this team. Not saying he's going to, but I think there's a chance. Justin Watson coming out of nowhere from Tampa, absolutely performing. Definitely going to be a special teams guy. And then obviously they go get Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and they get those types of players. We get Sky Moore, like I said. And so I think they really put a lot of pressure on him. And they put a lot of pressure on the entire receiving group to perform because, you got to go out there. You got the best quarterback in the NFL thrown to you. And if you want to catch passes and get paid, you're going to have to compete. And I just don't see that from him.
And it's sad. Like, I wish Josh Gordon nothing but the best, but it's really apparent that he's just not that same guy that he once was. And I think that the Chiefs just have so much talent at the wide receiver position that it just doesn't make sense to keep him. So I think we're both in agreement that Josh Gordon's more than likely going to get cut. And the second guy I think we also both agree on, and that guy is Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones has been kind of buried underneath the running back group all of training camp. He's been running with the threes and sometimes the fours. And in that preseason game, he had like almost 3/4 of film to show other teams. And all of that film basically shows him getting stuffed behind the line of scrimmage. Now, obviously, you got to take into account that's like the Chiefs' second and third string offensive line. It's not good. It was not good, and it didn't help him out at all. But even then, he didn't show anything promising or really anything that should give us hope. So I think that Ronald Jones is a name that, he looked good coming in this offseason. It was a low-risk, very high-reward possibility, though, but I just think that, this might be a Carlos Hyde situation where, you have Isaiah Pacheco screaming for playing time, and Jerick McKinnon's always been solid, and Clyde's the number one back right now, and he just kind of isn't going to fit the cut. And I think that, you might trade him for a pick, or you might just have to release him in general. But what are your thoughts on Ronald Jones?
I'm right there with you. I really, when we first signed him, extremely, extremely excited. I think that with him being down in Tampa, he was splitting a lot of time and then almost basically, lost a ton to Leonard Fournette. So coming into it, I would have said that he was going to give Clyde a run for his money. But then they turn around, they re-sign, Jerick McKinnon, they draft Pacheco. Clyde really put in the work in the offseason. And so I think that surprised the Chiefs. Obviously, you prepare the season in hopes. But I think that they're really surprised at how things have kind of shaken up. And I think that they're going to be okay with moving on from him. I lean more towards they're definitely going to try to trade for, a fifth, a sixth, if possible, and give him away to somebody who really may be in need if an injury happens. But if not, then obviously he's not going to make the squad. And then that leads to, like, Derrick Gore making the practice squad. So I think it's a good problem to have, though. And we've talked about this. Like, you want depth at every position. And, it's unfortunate that a good veteran is not going to make the squad.
I mean, I think that just shows you how much depth the Chiefs have, like you said, and they definitely aren't going to be hurting if they let go of Ronald Jones. And I just think that, he hasn't impressed really anyone this offseason in training camp or the preseason or even in practice. So I just think that Ronald Jones makes sense, and I think he's going to get cut. And, you kind of mentioned the third guy on my list and your list as well. I think Derrick Gore is in real trouble of getting cut. Now, more likely than not, he's probably going to go to the practice squad. That's just kind of where he's been. But, he got hurt in Saturday's preseason game. And, he's just, again, he's getting buried by all the other talented running backs on the roster. And I'm not sure if he's going to have a spot on this team when he gets back healthy.
I think, too, he really didn't have a good showing. I know he fumbled the football. I do think he dropped at least one or two passes, but I definitely know he fumbled the football. So he really didn't have a good showing. And then he, like you said, he had an injury neck problem that kept him out, which then they ended up going to like a fifth string type of guy. But yeah, man, it's going to be tough. I think he ends up on the practice squad. I think he's a very Darrell Williams-esque type of running back where, like, he's earned his way. And we know what we get. I mean, last year, the guy absolutely showed out in the preseason with Minnesota. He was like your two when Clyde went down. And so he has the ability to be that guy, I think, but they've really brought in some workhorses, man. And if Clyde's healthy, if Jerick McKinnon's healthy, and Pacheco, obviously the hype's real like we talked about earlier, then I definitely see him falling on that depth chart.
When, you said this off air to me, and it makes so much sense. The Chiefs have so many really good wide receivers that they're probably going to have to take one more of those and not as many running backs. And if you want to carry 4 tight ends, you can't carry 4 running backs. It just can't work like that. So they're going to have to make some sacrifices, and I think that, this year, that's going to come at the running back position. And I think Ronald Jones and Derrick Gore just kind of make sense. If it was up to me, Derrick Gore probably makes the practice squad and Ronald Jones gets traded or cut. But I think running back is where you're really going to see some big cuts. Now, Lucas, I saw this, and I kind of want to throw this out there. With the emergence of Shane Buechele, would you be surprised if the Chiefs cut Chad Henne?
I don't. So here's me. I'm going to say there's a 2% chance. I think Henne time, we know what he is. I could see him retiring after this season, potentially. I think they hold on to him for Patrick Mahomes' sake. I think the ability to communicate from kind of like his coaching ability, I think he means more to Patrick Mahomes than most people are aware of. I could see what you're talking about, and I understand what people are saying, but, man, I think Chad Henne is very, very valuable. And if something were to happen to Mahomes, I'd be okay with Henne being that backup. And I know he's getting paid a little bit more than maybe we would like, but I think Chad Henne provides a valuable asset that you'd look for in like a Chase Daniel or a, just a very solid backup.
See, I care less about, his contract. I just think that, he's getting old. Like, it feels like he's been with the Chiefs for like 10 years now, but he's getting older, and I think that, Shane Buechele looked really good in the preseason game, and he's the guy that the Chiefs have kept around for this long. I think the only rational thing to say is that at some point or another, Shane Buechele is going to be the backup. Now, I don't know how I'd feel about that if he had to come into a game, but he worked the offense really well in the preseason game, and if that's the guy that they're confident could be that backup number 2 quarterback, then that's okay. But I just think that with Chad Henne's age and with the emergence of Shane Buechele, it kind of made for an interesting point of conversation that maybe he's not a lock. But a guy that I also thought about, and this is no guarantee, and we're just going to start kind of going down the roster at this point. Deon Bush, safety Deon Bush. Now, he has gotten some pretty valuable playing time with the 1s and the 2s. But, the more that I kind of look at it, remember Willie Parks last year? How we just had so many DBs that it just didn't make sense to carry him. You got Lonnie Johnson and a lot of other DBs like Joshua Williams, the draft pick, and L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie, that you might have so many cornerbacks and safeties that you can't carry another one. And especially if the rookie Brian Cook is as good as I think that he can be, with Juan Thornhill and Justin Reed, you don't need a 4th safety. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Deon Bush can provide too is like a special teams. I really like. There's a couple guys that I like, but I think it's gonna be tough, man. Like, I like Zane Anderson, but he's kind of on the bubble. I think he could be like a practice squad candidate guy. I mean, Deon Bush is a very seasoned veteran, a lot of experience with the Bears. I could see him kind of sticking around just in case, because really the depth behind him is like Devon Key, who I was a big fan of last year, but obviously coverage issues. And so I think Deon Bush makes the squad. I think you're going to see like Nasir Greer potentially getting cut or like at least going to the practice squad. And Brandon Dandridge, he's more of a corner. But I think some of those like back-end guys, DiCaprio Boodle's probably not going to make the squad again. I think Lonnie Johnson's going to be able to make the squad. So I could see Deon Bush making the squad. But I also see exactly what you're saying, and we talked about that last year. They were loaded, and there's some of these guys are kind of hybrid, and they play a lot of where they put a lot of corners out there, and it really depends, man. Like this, to me, this year is the hardest to really pick a player and be like, yeah, he's not going to make it, unless we're just blatantly honest. Like Mike Rose, let's just be honest, he's not making the team. Like those types of guys, but like the ones that are more towards like the front of the depth chart, like it's going to be super tough to be like, yeah, I don't think he's going to make it.
Yeah, and I think, what you said, I'm not entirely sold on Deon Bush getting cut. Quite frankly, I don't know if I believe it. It's just a possibility or something that they might do. Now, the Chiefs have so many DBs that I do think they're going to have to cut somebody, and another candidate that could be a really good one to get cut is Chris Lammons. Now, he's a special team extraordinaire guy. He's one of Dave Tobe's finest special teams guys. But the one thing that kind of sticks out to me, he was involved in that Alvin Kamara Las Vegas dispute. Did you see that? I don't even know how that's possible or why Alvin Kamara would be hanging out with Chris Lammons. But the fact that he was kind of involved in that situation, I think he was arrested. That definitely didn't help his situation with the organization. And I think we're kind of seeing during training camp that there's a lot of guys that can be really good on special teams. You don't need to have this guy. And I think that, they're going to have to make some tough choices in the secondary. And I'm just not sure if Chris Lammons is going to be a guy that sticks around.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. With the off-the-field stuff and not having such a huge role, he was already let go once. I think he played with somebody else last year and found his way back to the Chiefs. So, yeah, I think if that's the case, then he's definitely an easy out-the-door type of guy. I was going to ask you real quick, just because I'm curious to know your thoughts. Obviously, Lucas Niang having some issues. Obviously, there's some health issues as well. Darian Kennard obviously coming in, playing some right tackle in more of a second-string type of role. What are your thoughts on Lucas Niang?
Oh, that's a Wow, that's a great question. And I'm glad that you segued into the offensive lineman because I was going to bring that up as well. I don't think that they would cut Lucas Niang because it just doesn't make sense. He's a guy that's under team control for, I think, a couple more years. And they wouldn't cut him, I don't think. I think he's hurt, too, so they'd have him on like the PUP list or injured reserve. I don't think that makes sense. I kind of like where you went with Darian Kennard. Kennard's not going to get cut, but during the preseason game on Saturday, I saw him playing in the fourth quarter, and my first reaction was, that's not good. If you have a guy that, could be competing for the starting right tackle job, he's not playing in the fourth quarter of a preseason game. It's not happening. So I think that it's basically going to be Wiley's job, and they're not going to cut Kennard, but he's going to be a name that we're going to be looking at saying, is he really good enough to play right tackle for the Chiefs? But, I don't think they cut Lucas Niang to kind of bring it full circle, but I do think they cut Austin Reiter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this right now, and, Orlando Brown, Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Andrew Wiley is probably going to be your starting front line. But then you got, like, Jerron Christian behind, Nick Allegretti, Austin Reiter, Darian Kennard, Roderick Johnson. We saw a lot of Mike Caliendo yesterday. I think he played like 64% of the snaps. And so they're really getting a look at him. And then obviously Lucas Niang still having some major issues. I could see him going on the IR and having the ability to come back. But, man, he's digging himself a massive hole. Just not being able to perform due to injuries and, being overweight. And I just think that, he's got a long way to come back. And with them drafting Darian Kennard and him playing right tackle, I think that sends a message to Lucas Niang, hey, man, something's going on and we're looking other ways.
He also wasn't that good when he did play. He had a lot of problems, and, I don't think that they would cut Lucas Niang this year, but next year, if he's having the same problem, they would cut him. I have no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I do think that they would cut him next year. But I think that right now his job is safe because he is injured. And they're not going to give up because he was a third-round draft pick, so they're not going to just waste that investment. But it's a good take and an interesting thing to look at because, the Chiefs do have so much talent on both sides of the ball that, there might be a surprise cut or somebody that is a fan favorite or a potential fan favorite gets released because, quite frankly, he just doesn't fit the bill. And, honestly, that's a pretty good problem to have because it just means that you're a good football team. But the Chiefs are going to have some really tough decisions to make, and specifically, I think, on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, I was going to ask you another question. Who's been your standout guy? Who do you believe, it's just been, your guy, and you're like, man, I'm so excited to see this guy performing, whether it was training camp, at the first preseason game, or he's just, doing his thing? Who are you looking at?
So, first of all, great question. You should be interviewing me. But there's been a couple. I've really been paying close attention to the rookies because I think that the Chiefs will go as far as the rookies kind of allow them to go this year. George Karlaftis, a guy that coming out of Purdue got a lot of criticism about not really being a great pass rusher because he just basically is a bull rusher. He pushed the left tackle into Justin Fields on Saturday, so that was a great sign. The high motor that is it's a cliche at this point in sports, but he truly has a high motor. He chased down Justin Fields countlessly on Saturday, and he got a sack for the first time in his NFL career. So great things out of George Karlaftis, and if he's that good, this pass rush is going to be much better than anticipated. But I think a guy that I've been really excited to see and watch is Sky Moore. I think Sky Moore is quietly having a phenomenal training camp. I mean, he's making amazing catches. He had a toe tap catch on Saturday in the preseason game. He's making really good plays that are just kind of flying under the radar because we're talking about Isaiah Pacheco and all that kind of hype. But I think Sky Moore is going to be phenomenal. And another guy that I'm kind of looking at closely is Brian Cook. I think that Brian Cook, if he is as good as we think he can be, he might beat out Juan Thornhill for that safety role. You know what I mean? If he is that hard-hitting safety that comes hard downfield, he's going to be phenomenal. And who can forget about Leo Chenal? I think, he played a lot on Saturday as the Mike, which would be Nick Bolton's backup. But I think that if he can learn how to play weak side linebacker or strong side linebacker, he's going to find the field a lot this season. So, Lucas, let me flip that question on you. Who have you been watching the most carefully, and who have you been examining?
Yeah, I got a couple guys. So people out there might laugh at me, but when he was drafted, I was kind of on board. Then I completely left his boat, and it pushed it off to the ocean. But Kalen Saunders, I think for him to be kind of Derek Notty's backup, Taylor Stallworth really showed out yesterday and has been playing pretty well. So I think Kalen Saunders needs to have a really good camp and a really good kind of preseason. He's been doing his hype thing again, but we've yet to see a full season from him. So Kalen Saunders has been one I've been really watching. But, man, I've been watching this secondary like a hawk. And Jalen Watson, holy smokes, man. Like, I'm hoping he can make this squad. Like, he almost intercepted a football yesterday. The Chiefs have been known to get guys later in the draft and even undrafted free agents and turn them into pretty good players. And we're seeing, like, Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, and some of these younger guys really kind of perform. And those two specifically, Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson, are guys that I've really been watching and I'm excited for. And I'm hoping that they can really come out and perform, because our secondary, man, that AFC West alone is going to be tough with all the wideouts and the tight ends. And, those two, I really am excited to see what they're capable of doing.
Well, I'm really glad that you mentioned Colin Saunders. Colin Saunders made a play in Saturday's game where he got behind the line of scrimmage and brought down the running back. That's like, you're like 324 pounds, dude. How did you get to that guy so quickly? Like, he has so much talent and athleticism. We've just yet to see it in a game. You know what I mean?
The size, like, people say he could play linebacker because of how quick and shifty he is. But, again, he's had, like, freak injuries. Like, I think it was either last year or the year before he dislocated his elbow and was out, like, 4 to 5 games. Maybe it was last year he did something similar because he was out almost the whole season. It's like, he's just got to get on the field and play in a full season. And, it's just, I'm excited to see what he can do in a full season. I know there's a lot of jokes about him and, he's terrible and all this, but, man, I think he's got the ability. It's just we got to be able to get him out there and play. But, another one that I've kind of been watching and I've kind of been disappointed with, and you might as well, or you might be as well, is Joshua Kando, man. Like, I watched him yesterday, and I just wasn't thrilled. He kind of reminds me still of, like, a Tano Passaniow, and it's like, is he – Carlos Dunlap, we go get Carlos Dunlap. Frank Clark's still on the team. Mike Gannis showed out. We draft George Karlaftis. And so I'm wondering, like, where do they see Joshua Kando fitting in?
Kando has just kind of been that guy since he was drafted that, like, he's got some pieces, but he wasn't really good in college, and we just kind of expected him to be a project piece, and he has not really developed at all. And I think he could be another guy that gets cut, but, I'm kind of hesitant to think that they're going to cut a guy that they drafted last year, but he's really not been very good. And you have other guys on the defensive line that are younger and have actually really showed out, like I think his name is Malik Herring, has been really good at defensive end. And like, you're seeing guys that aren't household names play pretty productive football in training camp and sometimes in the preseason games too.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's you get those guys. And I think Herring's done it a couple times. Like last year, I think in the preseason, he really showed out. I think he had a couple big-time things. And so there's some guys lurking. It's just, we've always keep pushing Frank Clark. We go draft George Karlaftis, which I cannot wait to see him play in a real game. Like, you just said it yourself, the motor, like the guy's literally running with a V10 and is just a monster on the field. He's going to blow linemen up. I think, to me, a lot of people were upset that Melvin Ingram decided to go somewhere else. I think Carlos Dunlap is going to be 10 times better. He's going to be able to provide more of a leadership role. I think he can help with like a Frank Clark even, and it's going to aid in George Karlaftis that much more. So in the end, man, I'm just so pumped for this defense. I'm excited for the entire football season, and I'm ready.
Amen. And the last thing that I wanted to say was, with the emergence of Justin Watson in that preseason game and kind of throughout training camp, I think it kind of shows you that they're going to have to kind of skimp out at wide receiver and cut some guys that are really good. I mean, we talked about Josh Gordon earlier in the video. Maurice Fountain might be a guy that also gets cut, or Corey Coleman, but here's what I think. It's going to come down to Dave Toub on special teams picking those guys. Like, I think that if he is all in on Maurice Fountain being a special teamer, he's going to make the team. But there's going to be a guy, whether it's Corey Coleman or Maurice Fountain, that doesn't make the team because they can't take them all. Like, they literally just cannot take all these wide receivers.
Yeah, I think, man, it's just going to be tough because it's what are they going to do? Are they going to go heavy on receiver, which I think they would? Or are they going to go heavy on tight ends? Because obviously we've seen us go with 4 tight ends. We run with a fullback, which I still can't figure out like why we like to run with a fullback.
That's just Andy Reid. I'll never understand.
I just really think like it depends on how they're going to go about it. And with kind of some of the injuries that have happened, I could see them going with 3 tight ends and then extending the wide receiver position. It's just that's what's going to be so tough is who does Dave Toub value more? Like clearly Justin Watson's going to make the squad. Corey Coleman has done very well when it comes to special teams. They even had him returning was a kickoff or a punt yesterday.
Yep.
So Corey Coleman, and he was a former first-round pick of the Browns. So they see value in him, and I think like his motivation to come back and perform is there. So it's just going to be tough. And I think really it comes down to chemistry with Patrick Mahomes. And I'm sure they're going to go to Patrick Mahomes and have him really kind of be like, hey, this guy meshes well with me. We connect. And then they're going to make their decision. So it's just going to be so tough.
For sure. Lucas, this has been a great episode. We got through a lot of different names. But I think that the names that we're the most confident are probably going to get cut are Josh Gordon, Ronald Jones, and potentially Derrick Gore, and also throw in Chris Lammons. So, Lucas, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Where can the people find you?
Head over to the Beat of KC, guys. That's where I basically go to and feed all my information through my Twitter. So the Beat of KC.
And as for me, you guys can follow me on Twitter. That is at KC Sports Report. Instagram is KC_. What did I just say? Instagram is KC_Sports Report. I had a minor stroke there. We're recording this video at Sports Radio 810 WHB. And until next time, guys, thank you for watching this video, and go Chiefs. Oh my gosh, I gotta take some aspirin.